Outgoing Secretary of State Mike Pompeo tweeted that Beijing's treatment of Uyghur Muslims amounted to genocide and crimes against humanity.
Mr. Speaker, the evidence of the scale and the severity of the human rights violations being perpetrated in Xinjiang against the Uyghur Muslims is now far-reaching.
Not one, not some, but every single provision in the United Nations Genocide Convention violated by the Chinese government's treatment of Uyghurs and other Muslim minorities in Xinjiang.
Understanding the Uyghur people's ordeal is the least we can do. Let me explain to you the situation at hand. China is made up of 56 ethnic groups, the largest of which are the majority Han, making up 91% of the population. The Uyghurs are a Muslim minority who've been residing in the Chinese province of Xinjiang for centuries. There are 12 million of them living in China, making up only 1% of the population. They speak their own language and ethnically and culturally resemble the Central Asian countries of the world. Xinjiang, the Uyghurs' home base, is a province teeming with natural resources. It has 1/5 of China's oil, produces 1/5 of the world's cotton, and has China's largest coal reserves. It is a vital province for China, and that is where the problem begins. Over the last few decades, there has been a massive Han migration from other areas of China into Xinjiang. The Uyghurs resent the Hans taking advantage of their homeland's resources, restricting their traditional way of life, and taking over their land. This resentment is exacerbated due to a history of bad blood. Both groups disagree on which has greater claim to Xinjiang. Uyghurs believe their ancestors were indigenous to the area, but the majority Han government considers Xinjiang to have belonged to China since 200 BC. Since the migration, the Han government cracked down on any activity that constituted separatism from China. The Uyghurs' freedom of religion had been severely held back by the authorities, and as a result, they vehemently opposed the Han rule and wanted independence. All this led to many violent riots and protests across Xinjiang, some of which include the 2008 Kashgar attack, which left 16 dead, unrest before the Beijing Olympics, which left 8 dead, and the 2009 riots in Urumqi, with more than 1,000 protesters. But the key attacks that led to the current crisis unfolding happened in 2014. President Xi Jinping visited Xinjiang, and on the last day of his trip, 2 Uyghur militants killed 3 in a suicide attack. 1 month later, Uyghur terrorists tossed explosives into a vegetable market, killing 31. That was a straw that broke the camel's back. Hidden texts leaked to the New York Times found secret speeches made after the attacks by President Xi. None of these speeches were made public. The president called on the party to unleash the tools of dictatorship to stop the unrest. Previous President Hu Jintao was focused on economic development, but Xi said this wasn't enough. He wanted an ideological solution to rewire the Uyghurs' thinking. He wanted to control not only their every action, but their every thought. The Communist Party set up a penetrating network of surveillance. Cameras scanned people, faces, cars, everything. Neighborhood informants were encouraged. Re-education sites began opening across Xinjiang. They held dozens of Uyghurs who were pressured into leaving Islam and forced to display undying loyalty to the Chinese Communist Party. Xinjiang had become a totalitarian state, but still, genocide was a far cry away. Then came a key communist hardliner, Chen Quangguo. This was a bad sign for the Uyghurs. He had evicted and demolished the homes of thousands of monks and nuns studying in Buddhist academies within Tibet. Then in 2016, he was transferred from Tibet to Xinjiang. Immediately, he called for local officials to focus on President Xi's speeches made after the 2014 attacks, in which he directed local officials to respond with absolutely no mercy. He used these speeches as a presidential mandate. That was in 2017. It's now been 4 years since Chen implemented Xi's vision for Xinjiang. What has happened since then is hard to fathom. China has been accused of locking up 1 million Muslims in Xinjiang without trial. They are being held in so-called re-education camps, which the government claims they are willingly attending to combat terrorism and religious extremism. Leaked documents known as the China Cables prove that the camps are intended to run as high-security prisons with punishments and not as education centers. According to satellite images, they have developed incredibly fast. Take the Dabancheng camp. The walls enclosing the camp are 2 kilometers long, with 16 guard towers. 10,000 people are estimated to be in this one camp alone. It has grown massively since 2015. But we may never find out the true scale because of China restricting journalists' access to the region. BBC journalists were turned back 4 times as they tried to visit Dabancheng. Police claimed roads were melting due to the hot sun, and the other roads were coincidentally also closed for military training. When a BBC reporter was finally allowed access to one education center, conveniently also chosen by the Chinese authorities, he noted that it was highly staged. He was subject to choreographed performances from the Uighurs, and noted that their smiles were fixed in place. He said it reminded him of the World War II period, when Germany organized media trips to concentration camps, designed to demonstrate how humane they were. This camp is one of hundreds. Adrian Zenz, an expert researcher, estimates that the number of camp has even exceeded 1,000, and that was in 2019. According to Shorat Zakri, the chairman of the Xinjiang region, the freedom of the trainees is completely unrestricted. They can go home and leave anytime they want. But reports say the Uyghurs had to surrender all their passports to the police for safekeeping. The latest report claims this: Uyghur detainees are deprived of their basic human needs, severely humiliated, and subject to inhumane treatment or punishment, including solitary confinement without food for prolonged periods. Suicides have become so pervasive that detainees must wear suicide-safe uniforms and are denied access to materials susceptible to causing self-harm. Even death is denied to them. This leaked video shows blindfolded, shaven Uyghurs being led inside trains to be taken to these camps. It again draws parallels with another ruthless dictator transporting a religious minority to camps. Both situations are not dissimilar. When questioned by BBC's Andrew Marr, China's ambassador to the UK claimed it was fake news and that he didn't know where the interviewer got the video. All China has released are glossy reports, full of clean classrooms and grateful students. But for these students, there is no graduation in sight. A leaked script for officials described how to talk to students who had returned to Xinjiang to visit their already imprisoned families. If asked, "Did my family commit a crime?" the instructed response should be, "No, it is a thinking that has been infected." That tells you everything you need to know. They had been taken prisoner without committing any crime. It is a dystopian future, brought to life in a brutal Orwellian manner. Loyalty to the party and to President Xi is the only thing of importance. Current inmates undergo years of indoctrination and interrogation to transform them into secular members of the party. There are also claims of widespread slavery. In December 2020, research seen by the BBC showed up to 500,000 people being forced to pick cotton. There is evidence that Uyghurs are being released from these re-education camps only to be reinserted into re-education factories. Thousands of these factories have been set up in Xinjiang, where they benefit from this slave labor. Gulzira and Yerzan were two former workers of these factories and luckily managed to escape. They said they earned $50 a month, less than 20% of the minimum wage. Any form of resistance would lead to detention back in the re-education camps. Their manager could do anything with no consequence, as slave owners did back in 19th century America. So the adults are being sent away to the camps. What happens to the children? There are reports that Uyghur children are being placed in state orphanages and Uyghur-only boarding schools. The ages of these children? As young as 3 years old. How does a 3-year-old function without their parents? Xinjiang's government is attempting to raise a new generation cut off from original roots, religious beliefs, and their own language, said Adrian Zenz. The BBC actually interviewed Uyghurs whose families were taken. Not only had they not seen their children in years, but they had no idea if they were even alive. Abdurrahman Toti lives in Turkey. 3 years ago, his wife took his 3 kids to Xinjiang to visit her grandparents. He hasn't heard from them since. This year, he found his son online in a video posted on the internet, but his son was speaking Mandarin, not his native Uyghur language. The goal of the authorities is clear. They want full control of the new generation, to raise this generation as Han people, to strip every little bit of their identity from them, to cut them off from their families, their culture, their language, their religion, and their Uyghur background. It is cultural genocide. Of course, senior officials deny everything, even laughing at one point when suggested by a reporter that it would be harmful for children as young as 3 to be separated from their parents. Khalida from Kazakhstan said all her children and all 14 of her grandchildren were taken. It's been a full year. She wept and cried for them as she was interviewed. The BBC went to Xinjiang to look for her children. The family home was locked and deserted. When calling the village official for the location of Khalida's family, they were hung up on. Dursane Ziawuddin spent 9 months in the women's camp, where women were systematically raped, sexually abused, and tortured on a daily basis. This is her story. For many nights they took her. She said she was tortured and later gang raped on 3 occasions, each time by 2 or 3 men. She was beaten by being stabbed on her abdomen. The beatings were so bad that she had to have her womb removed in the US when eventually let out. She is now infertile. Dursunay's cellmate, who said she was detained for giving birth to too many children, disappeared for 3 days, and when she returned, her body was covered with horrific bite marks from the rape. She couldn't say it, said Dursunay. She wrapped her arms around my neck and sobbed continuously, but she said nothing. After 9 months of torture, she was released. Then she saw her former cellmate collapse on the street. The woman had been consumed by alcohol addiction. She was like someone who simply existed, otherwise she was dead, completely finished by the rapes. The same women were forcibly sterilized, including a woman who was just 20 years old. Dursunay said the Uighur woman begged the soldiers to leave her, as she had so much life ahead of her, but their cries were ignored. Leaked documents from 2018 reveal plans for mass female sterilization in Uighur regions. In 2019, 80% of all net IUD placements in China were performed in Xinjiang, but Xinjiang only makes up 1.8% of the population. This is the UN's 4th criteria for genocide, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the targeted group. What President Xi is orchestrating is the very definition of genocide. The Uyghurs' right to religion is also severely repressed. Every Friday, we were forced to eat pork meat. They have intentionally chosen a day that is holy for the Muslims. Even kindergarten children were given pork to get them accustomed to the taste. A leaked file, the Caracas list, showed growing a beard, wearing a veil, praying, visiting banned websites, and having too many children were some of the reasons why Uyghurs were sent to detention camps. The party wants to strip every shred of religion from you. Now, you've seen the evidence. In fact, the proof is so strong that even both the Democrat and Republican parties agree. Mike Pompeo said, "I believe this genocide is ongoing and that we are witnessing the systematic attempt to destroy Uyghurs." In January of 2021, when asked to respond to Pompeo's comments, the Biden administration's Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, said, "On the Uyghurs, I think we're very much in agreement." Before Biden took over, the Trump administration actually took physical action by banning imports of cotton and tomato products from Xinjiang. They also blacklisted Chinese companies suspected to be using Uyghur forced labor. The UK, Canada, and France have also issued similar statements condemning the Chinese government. But the key piece of action was in October 2020. Germany and 39 other countries led a statement urging China to allow UN rights observers unrestricted access to Xinjiang. But then there came a counter-statement. This was made by a different group of 45 countries showing their support for what China is doing in Xinjiang. One excerpt states, "People of all ethnic groups enjoy their happy life in a peaceful and stable environment. For many nations, economic ties with China have become too substantial to be entirely cut off. China alone is powerful enough to stop trading with countries that act against it, even if they only verbalize their disapproval. Do countries focus on the genocide of their fellow humans or their own economic health? Profit seems to be the verdict so far." It's estimated that 10% of the Uyghurs are being held against their will, and this is just the beginning. There is no freedom of press, and with virtually no footage, millions more will suffer unnoticed. For Imin, an escaped Uyghur, he says this, "People are dying, and no one will do anything to save the Uyghur people. No one will do anything." In the description is an online petition and a link showing 6 ways you can help the Uyghurs. Please sign it, share it, and share this video. This was Harry. Thank you for watching.